There we go. The reason I'm doing that is purely so that we can then again put it up here with our resources and it can be there to share for everyone. Okay. So what we're going to do today, we're going to look at 4 areas of functionality. One is progress reviews, deploying learning content, reassigning learners to different assessors, recording communications, and then we've got a session where we've already had 1 or 2 good questions come in via email or thoughts or best practice. We'll go through that and see, and that's your opportunity to input into this. Firstly, progress reviews. I'm going to try and minimize something on my screen if I may, make a little bit more space. Progress reviews. First, let's be clear what we're talking about, because as we know within our industry, there are lots and lots of different nomenclature for similar things. What we're talking about is an opportunity for typically an assessor and a learner to have a discussion, to agree the progress at a certain point in time, maybe to agree next steps, etc. That's what it is. You may call it something entirely different, but that's what we're talking about right now. We're going to look how we can schedule them automatically through the system, how we can do an ad hoc one, how we complete them, and then how a learner can confirm. So, in terms of scheduling, within VQManager, sorry, my screen is quite obscured here. I can't really see what we're seeing here. Just 1 second while I try and improve that. There we go. What we're looking at here, this is the Center Administrator view. Always look at the top of the screen to see whose view it is. And we can see that within the Users area, the Center Administrator is currently looking at individual users. If we go and find an individual user, we can find, for instance, this user, Charles Marler. Let's click on his name. And you're probably familiar with this if you're a Center Administrator. There's a whole lot of stuff you can do in this area, one of which is to do with progress reviews. And if you want to enable for this particular learner, you simply tick on the box. That means that learner will now be able to use the learner progress review functionality. We have a notional start date. We can put in a target end date for these progress reviews. And during that period, we can choose how frequently we'd like them to occur. In this case, we'll go for every 4 weeks. So this is simply a way that you can use the system to automatically schedule those reviews. Learners will get reminders, assessors will get reminders when they're coming up, and it means that you're able to set and adhere to a pattern. Just before we move on from here, this area below, this is incidentally some of you may not be fully aware of this. If your learners are doing recording off-the-job training hours, this is where you can set their targets either through their contracted work times per week, in which case it'll do an automatic calculation, or alternatively, you can simply input the number of total hours required. As a slight aside, I thought I'd mention it while we're here. Okay, so progress reviews. This is an instance where we want to set a pattern of recurring reviews. We set it for every 4 week. Learner and assessor will get notification. Another way of getting to the progress reviews, and this is what we've used if we were doing ad hoc reviews, is as follows. So we'll see now I'm in the assessor role. I'm in the My Learners area, and I've opened a tab called Progress Reviews. One of the first things again to do is, okay, progress reviews, which learner? So the system offers me my learners, and let's go again. Let's stick with this guy, Charles Marler. I'm going to scroll down a little, and we can see here previous progress reviews. So these are previous ones. We've got the dates they were planned, the dates they actually occurred, the date they were logged, apologies, and the date the review actually occurred, because those might be 3 different dates. We've got names for them. We can see who logged them. In this case, they're all logged by me and the assessor. But maybe this learner has 2 assessors, and in which case you'd be able to see clearly which of the assessors logged this particular review. Again, I can see notes if I want, so I can open that up and see notes that were created at that time. And if there were attachments created, we can also see those. So that's the previous reviews. If I scroll down a little bit further, I can access this area where we add a new progress review. And if we're doing an ad hoc review, this is where we do it. So we open up this area. I've completed this form. It's really just a template. So we're calling it a spring review. It's a remote COVID-specific one. Planned it a couple of days ago, actually created it yesterday. We can put in there so I, as the assessor, this is my view of where Charles is up to. It's my commentary on how he's doing. I can add my priority, what I want him to be doing between now and the next review. So I can add all that kind of detail. And then importantly, because again, we're looking at this is now all remote, importantly, I can ask Charles or the learner to confirm this. So by ticking the box, the system will automatically prompt the learner for confirmation of this progress review. I can also do the same thing for the line manager if I wish. Again, just in terms of nomenclature, line manager in this case, we're talking about the employer predominantly. Okay, so I'm the assessor, I've created this review and I'm comfortable with it. I'll just click on save. My learner, this is the learner's homepage to-do tab. Within the to-do tab, they see the stuff that they've got to address, the stuff they've got to be aware of and respond to. And we can see here it is, spring review, it's the COVID review, and the learner will go and confirm that. Let's do exactly that. Here's what the learner sees. They see, again, the dates that were entered. We see the commentary that I put in. Sorry if that's a little bit small, but that is basically my commentary as the assessor. We can see the learner has ticked this box saying they confirm it, they're happy with it, they agree. And they've also added their own comments. So we can see again there's a kind of a dialogue occurring here because the learner said, well, we also agreed that I should record as much evidence myself as possible. So that's good. So the learner has added to this. So it becomes a collaborative thing and we both jointly signed it off. The other thing to note, sorry, just before we move from here, is that the system has automatically created almost a timestamp. So on the date that this was actually created, 24th of the 3rd, it's recorded the progress in all of these areas, all of these aspects of the learner's framework. So it does that automatically. So again, when we go back and we can look at previous reviews, and we will see the progress at each of those reviews automatically. Okay, we look at how to deploy learning content. This, I think, is particularly pertinent right now because it's a challenging time perhaps for, let's say, an apprentice to be gathering evidence of competency. They can still do it, but it's more challenging. So, while they've got this downtime or whatever we want to call it, let's get them to get through some learning, some knowledge-based stuff. So that's what this is about. It's how we can deploy that learning content through VQManager. We're going to look at where the content resides, and we're going to look at the best ways to deploy it. And really, there's just one I'm going to focus on, which is the assessment plan. Okay, so where does this content live? We are looking at the assessor's view here, and in the assessment tools area, each assessor has got something called the file library. The file library is a repository where all of this learning content or other resources can reside. And we can see in this example here that this particular assessor in the default folder has got a template for a 12-week review. They've got a bit of learning content. They've got candidate certification forms. So the file library, you can collect all kinds of different resources in there. You can also administer them. So this is the default folder, but you can set up your own folder structure and you can move files around within here. You can also delete, etc. So it's a place to put these resources and it's a place to administer them. The top button you might have noticed there was add files to this library, to the library. So the assessor on an independent basis can upload anything they want and they can stick it in their file library for future use. At the bottom of the file library, we'll see that I've used that add files facility to add some new files. I've got some learning content support module 1. I've actually got 2 versions of that. One's a PDF and one's Word. I've got some content to support module 2. So I've dropped those into my default folder and then I've moved them into this new folder I've created called Learning Content for Remote Learners. So we can administer all this learning content and manage it within that area. I'm going to save that. So that's the content. It's in the file library. How do we therefore get that into our... Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Just on the file library, I think it's worth mentioning as well, just reminding people that as well as that independent ability to add files, you can do that centrally as well.
Yeah,
so you can use a file librarian login and upload content so it's standardized across your learners and share that with all your assessors, selected learners, however you'd like to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you as an organisation now say, right, we need to do this, we've got some learning content or we've created some or we need to create some, then we need to share that as a standard package across our assessors, you can do that and you can deploy it into all of those assessors' file libraries in one go. Right, deploying to the learners. As I say, I think the best way to do this is through something called an assessment plan. You may call these action plans, you may call them something entirely different. As you know, you can alter that within VQManager, you can alter the nomenclature. But this is the area where we create a template that we can reuse. And within the template, we're telling the learner what it is we want them to be doing. So in this particular instance, this learning content is going to pertain to this particular qualification, customer service. It doesn't have to. And I basically fill out the template with what my assessment plan is going to be. So I'm going to call it the knowledge content for March 2020. That's my name of this particular template. When I fill in the words here, what I'm doing is I'm saying to the learner exactly what I would say if I was face-to-face with them. So if I was face-to-face, I'd be saying, well, I want you to work through the attached files. We've got the learning content for March. At the end of each, you'll find a knowledge test. I want you to do that. I might also say, apart from those, there's some additional external content, effectively, which you can find here. And here are some hyperlinks. Those actually link to some BBC bite-sized stuff. But those could link to any other sources of useful stuff. There's so much useful stuff on the web now that you can point your learners to. It may indeed be your own Moodle stuff. Okay, so there's my instruction, what I want my learner to do with some hyperlinks. Share files from library, let's click on that, because this is now where the system opens my file library where I put all this stuff, and I can select the files that I want to be attached to this particular learning plan. And hopefully you can see the two ticks here of the two bits of learning content. So I'm going to save that. As soon as I save that, I've created this template. I've given it the name, which was learning content for March. I've told the learner or learners within it exactly what I want them to do. I've added some links to some useful external resources, and I've added the stuff from my file library. So I've created that template. Next thing I do with that template, well, it's there forever for me to use forever, but probably right away I might want to apply that to some learners. So in the apply to learners area, again, the system will bring up a list of all the learners allocated to me, and I can simply tick to identify which of my learners I'd like this allocated to. There are different options. This column here, for instance, requires the learner's confirmation. Right now, with my learners being remote, I'd probably do that. I want them to confirm they've seen it. And I'd probably also tick this column, which means that if the learner's got an email address in the system will automatically send them an email to saying that they've got this plan and they need to look at it. So it's a really solid way of letting your learner know that they have got the content and deploying it to them. Okay. Right. Yeah, sorry, last thing I do, once I've selected the learners it's going to is create a target date. So I've selected a date, which is the end of the month, and I've simply now clicked to apply to my learners. Okay, so that was getting learning content into the system, and it was getting it to the learners in a way that they understand exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They can access the content, and once they've done that, you can actually see that they've done that. You can see their progress. Okay, reassigning learners to different assessors. When might this be important? So this is something which we discussed the other day, where maybe an assessor it has to be away. They have to self-quarantine. They have to they're unable to work for a period. So what do we do? Because that assessor is responsible for 20, 30, 50 learners. What happens next? We need to take those learners and assign them to another assessor so that they can continue to progress. Let's have a look at this. So we are back in the Centre Administrator area. Your Centre Admin, we looked at this earlier, there's an area where they manage and administer users, and within there's a number of tabs. Let's look at a specific user initially. We're going to take this particular user, Charles Marler. Again, let's click on him. And again, within the form, all the stuff that we can do for Charles Marler, one of the things is this learner assignment. We're saying which assessor is he assigned to. In this case, we can see it's somebody called Philip Baker. What I can do immediately is say, okay, so Philip's not going to be around. I'm going to assign this learner to this chap, Robert Goodrow. So I would simply tick the box, and that would now cement within the system a relationship between the learner and Robert Goodrow. If I wanted to, I could untick Philip Baker. If I think Philip Baker's never coming back because he's actually moved, he's gone away, I could untick him, or I could leave them both assigned to the learner in the meantime without any problem at all. Again, point to note, within here, we see against Philip Baker's name the qualifications that he typically assesses or that he's qualified to assess. But we need to make sure, of course, if we're adding another assessor or swapping, that they are also able to assess those same qualification areas. So on a one-to-one basis or an individual basis, that's how we do it. Of course, more likely, if an assessor moves away, you're going to be dealing with a number of learners who are affected. So again, in this same area, we're looking at the users area, and we have here a new tab called Bulk Edit. Let's have a look at that. So within Bulk Edit, we can do a whole number of things. We can really administer lots and lots of individuals within the system. In this particular case, we're dealing with this assessor issue. So the first thing we'll do is assign a new assessor to those learners. So I'm simply going to select the option that says assign assessor to learners. Forward too far there. Yeah, assign assessor to learners. We have some ifs, whats, some various questions here, but we'll leave if assigned to, and then I've got my existing assessors. Now the assessor who is going off sick is called Juliet Clark. So I'm going to select Juliet Clark. We've selected Juliet, and now we can refine this even more. We can say Juliet's learners who are doing business admin or customer service or whatever, we can refine that. Or the ones who are working for Tesco's or for Sainsbury's or whatever, we can refine that. And as we refine that, we see the list of learners that generates. In this case, there are just 2, and I'm going to select both of them. And then the system says, okay, so what do you want to do with those? Well, we've already said we want to assign them to an additional assessor. So again, I've got a drop down of all the other assessors, and I select. So what we've done here is very similar to what we did on a one-by-one basis, except we've chosen the activity and we've done it over bulk. There could have been 60, there could have been 100 learners, of course, in this list. And in one fell swoop, we additionally, as well as Juliet, we allocate those to Anne Robertson. If we did that, again, we've now got 2 assessors looking after these learners. If we thought that Juliet wasn't going to come back, she's moved to another organisation, you might want to come back to the top of here. And if you remember, at the top of this, one of the options here was remove assessor from learners. So you can do exactly the same process to remove Juliet, so she's no longer allocated to those learners. Communications. So, whilst there's less contact perhaps between assessor and learner, or training provider and learner, face-to-face contact, there's probably going to be more email contact, stuff like that. So how does VQManager help us to record all of those communications? Because it's really important, if someone like an IQA or an EQA is trying to get a picture of a learner, that all of the communication that might have occurred is visible. So firstly, there's communication that happens within VQManager. Here we are, we're looking at a learner's homepage, their to-do list, and here are a couple of examples. We can see evidence returned for action by assessor. So we know this scenario. The learner has submitted some evidence, the assessor's looked at it, needs to send it back to the assessor, maybe because back to the learner, perhaps because they've forgotten an attachment or something. And the assessor's comments will be within here. So the assessor is commenting back to the learner, communicating with the learner. Similarly, we looked at the example with the assessment plans a moment ago, where maybe there's an assessment plan which contains the learning. Again, it's communication between those parties using the system. And that works between learners and assessors, assessors and IQAs, etc. But what about stuff that happens outside? What if there is something important that's been included within an email? In this example here, we can see this email came from Anne the assessor. It was to Charles, and it was definitely to do with his qualification. It's talking about the current situation, talking about working differently, etc. It's useful stuff, and it's stuff that's got bearing on this particular learner's progression. The title is The Way I Need You to Work for the Next Few Weeks. So this is external communication. And under some circumstances, this could be lost when, say, an IQA or an EQA is trying to track progress of this learner. But because Anne, when she created this email, copied in this email address here, you may not be able to see that. That says portfolio@vqmanager.co.uk. And everyone uses the same address. Everyone uses that. Because Anne has CC'd this mail to that, what will happen is when this mail goes to Charles, who will receive it in the normal way, it also goes to VQManager. And because VQManager knows who it's come from, i.e. Anne, it will put it in her homepage, in her to-do list. Let's see that. So here is Anne the assessor. Within her to-do list on the homepage, she's got this area called emails awaiting further processing. And here it is. That was the subject line we put in the email, the way I need you to work for the next few months. We can process it. Firstly, what do we want to process it into? Oh, sorry, not too far. There's a drop down there, and let's say, well, we want it to go into the learner activity log. That's what it is really. That's where it's most useful, this kind of communication. But let's put it in the learner activity log. Once we've selected the learner activity log, again, we can say, well, what kind of thing was it? Well, let's call it a communication. It's automatically pulled through from the email, the subject line, it's pulled through the date of the email, it's pulled through the content of the email. So automatically, that is now saved into the learner's activity log. The learner, when they access their activity log, and here's a grab of that with the various logs that are in the learner's activity log. Again, we can see it here at the bottom. Here it is. It was a communication. It was done yesterday or the day before yesterday. There's the description, and again, I can look at it and I can go and see what it was. So again, whether your communication is internal within VQManager, that's all handled automatically, but even external communication as well. All you've got to do, copy that email address, portfolio at VQManager, and that will also be recorded within VQManager. So you're getting a really full picture of progress. Right. I promise to go through it fairly quickly. As I say, if you need more information on any of those, go to the website where there's more information, or just get in touch with us. Get in touch with me, Joe, Carrie, Kim, Chris. Any of us will help you with any of those things. Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Carrie. Carrie's going to run this next bit. It's the opportunity where she's going to look at some of the questions which you emailed into us prior to this session. And also it's an opportunity for you to raise a hand and ask a question once those have been